I've always been one for adventure. At 28 years old, I thrive on exploring new places and meeting new people. So when I stumbled upon an idyllic rustic house nestled deep in the woods on Airbnb, I couldn't resist booking a weekend getaway. The listing boasted tranquility and stunning views, a perfect escape from the hustle and bustle of city life. Upon arriving at Whispering Pines, I was greeted by Mrs. Thompson, a frail-looking elderly woman of about 85 years old. Her eyes had a peculiar cloudy ring around the irises, something I had never seen before, which gave her a mysterious and unsettling appearance. The house was two-story, with the second floor dedicated to rental guests and the first floor where Mrs. Thompson lived. She welcomed me with freshly baked cheese cookies, a delicacy I had never tasted before and instantly fell in love with. Mrs. Thompson was reserved but kind, clearly passionate about cheese making. She even had a variety of cheeses labeled neatly in her pantry, each crafted by her skilled hands. The first night was serene. I savored the quietude of the forest, enjoying Mrs. Thompson's company and stories by the fireplace. But by the second day, I began feeling unwell. Headaches and a creeping sense of malaise plagued me. Mrs. Thompson, concerned due to our remote location, tended to me attentively, offering herbal teas and remedies she concocted herself. On the second night, my discomfort worsened. I awoke in a cold sweat, parched and feverish. Disoriented, I stumbled into the kitchen for water and noticed something unsettling. A wedge of cheese labeled kasumarzu, its surface wriggling with dead worms. Horror dawned on me as I realized Mrs. Thompson had been feeding me this traditional Sardinian cheese known for its worm larvae. My stomach churned violently, waves of nausea washing over me. Sharp pains twisted my gut, and I could feel my body weakening with each passing hour. Mrs. Thompson insisted it was a mild reaction to the rich cheeses, assuring me it would pass. But as the hours dragged on, I grew more incapacitated, unable to muster the strength to even confront her about the grotesque discovery. By the third day of my stay, I woke in the dead of night, consumed by an unquenchable thirst. Weak and disoriented, I stumbled to the kitchen once more. As I drank water, my eyes fell upon a jar filled with murky liquid labeled herbal remedy. Beside it lay a folded note, hastily scrawled with Mrs. Thompson's trembling hand. Words of regret mixed with cryptic warnings of staying forever cleansed. Chills ran down my spine as I read the note, a deep sense of dread filling me. I knew I had to leave immediately. As I passed Mrs. Thompson's room, I heard her whispering in a language I couldn't understand, invoking something to keep me there forever. The eerie sound of her chanting sent another wave of chills through me. My head throbbed with intense pain, I was freezing, and the abdominal pain was unbearable. Gathering what little strength remained, I stumbled through the front door and into the pre-dawn stillness. I walked aimlessly through the forest, stumbling over rocks a couple of times before collapsing and losing consciousness. When I woke up, I found myself in a hospital bed. Concerned hikers had found me and rescued me, but the memory of Mrs. Thompson's sinister intentions continues to haunt me. Mrs. Thompson's whereabouts remain unknown, but locals whisper of strange happenings at Whispering Pines, of eerie lights flickering in the house long after she vanished. Some believe she met a fate fitting her dark deeds, while others fear she still lurks in the shadows, awaiting another unsuspecting guest to cleanse.
My name is Sarah, and I want to share a deeply unsettling experience that happened to my fiancé, Chad, and me during a trip to Helsinki. We were staying at an Airbnb to visit some family, but what started as an ordinary trip quickly turned into one of those rare experiences you remember with clarity for the rest of your life, as if it happened just yesterday. When we arrived and got settled, Chad had to go out to buy some food, and I started checking the apartment more thoroughly to see if there was anything missing that we might need. Specifically, I remember saying out loud to myself that I wished there was another towel hook in the bathroom. There was only one, and obviously 2 towels would be used. The next day, we were out pretty much all day, and when we got back that night, there was another towel hook in the bathroom. At first, it seemed strange. I hadn't mentioned our need for another towel hook to the host, and there were no signs that anyone had been in the apartment while we were out. It seemed impossible, but I tried to ignore it and went to bed, convincing myself I simply hadn't seen it because they were one in front of the other and not side by side. I didn't even bother to ask Chad about it. The next morning, while making coffee, I noticed that the sugar jar was on the opposite side of the counter from where I had left it. I clearly remembered placing it next to the coffee maker, but now it was by the stove. I asked Chad if he had moved it, but he said he hadn't touched it. I shrugged it off, thinking I must have been mistaken. The next day, we went to visit Chad's aunt, Ivy, who had recently moved into a new house. She lived alone and needed help organizing her new place. We spent the whole day with her, arranging her apartment and buying some things she needed to be comfortable from the start. Moving is usually exhausting, so by the end of the day, I was dead tired. I just wanted to take a shower, continue reading Bartleby, the Scrivener on my phone, and go to bed. Later that day, when we returned to our apartment, I went to retrieve my phone charger from the living room. With all the hustle and bustle of the day, I hadn't been able to charge my phone, and it was nearly out of battery. I was sure I had left it plugged into the outlet by the couch, but now it was on the coffee table. Once again, Chad denied moving it, and I started to feel a growing sense of unease. That night, I had the most vivid dream. I was in the bathroom, looking at the new towel hook, when I saw a shadow move behind me in the mirror. I turned around, but there was no one there. I could feel my heart pounding as I stared at the empty bathroom. The shadow seemed to stay just out of sight, always on the periphery of my vision. When I woke up, I was drenched in sweat, my heart racing. It was impossible to go back to sleep, so I had to settle for resting my body with my eyes closed, trying to trick my mind into thinking I was asleep. I had a bad feeling about the place, but there wasn't much I could do about it. The next day, I felt drained and apathetic. I told Chad about the dream, but he just laughed it off, saying it was probably just the stress of traveling and being in a new place. I wanted to believe him, but everything was very strange. As we explored the city that day, I couldn't help but feel like we were being watched. Every now and then, I'd catch a glimpse of a shadow out of the corner of my eye, but when I turned to look, there was nothing there. Since childhood, I've never been very sociable. Crowded places overwhelm me, so I attributed it to my discomfort being around so many people on the street. Chad noticed I was jumpy and tried to reassure me, but it was no use. I had never before experienced the feeling of being watched in such an overwhelming way, and the lack of sleep only worsened my perception. When we returned to the apartment that night, I was on edge. I half expected to find something else changed, but everything seemed normal. Still, I couldn't relax. I kept glancing around, looking for any signs of an intruder. Chad suggested we go out for dinner to take my mind off things, to which I initially refused, claiming I was too tired and needed to catch up on sleep. He convinced me by suggesting we get pepperoni pizza, my favorite, and promised we'd head straight to bed afterward. We went to a nearby pizzeria, but this time was worse. Upon entering the crowded pizzeria, I couldn't help feeling like everyone was watching me. I pulled up my hood, hoping to lessen the feeling, but it didn't help. Every time the door opened, I jumped, expecting to see someone standing there, staring at us. I couldn't enjoy the food, and we left early. I barely nibbled on a slice of pizza as I had completely lost my appetite. Fearing another sleepless night, I went to a pharmacy, telling Chad I needed some tampons, but what I bought was clonazepam to ensure I got enough rest and woke up refreshed. I was sure I just needed to sleep. I wasn't used to not sleeping, and the fact that I had arrived exhausted from Ivy's move without having recovered energy had affected me more than I thought. After taking a bath, I went to the kitchen and swallowed the pill in one gulp with a glass of water. Of course, I did this without Chad noticing, as he would surely tell me I was overreacting. I went straight to bed and couldn't remember when my mind shut off to recharge. Suddenly, an immense thirst woke me. I slipped on my slippers and walked to the kitchen. I tried to see the time on the clock in the hallway, but I must still be tired because it looked blurry, though it seemed to be 3 a.m. It must have been a full moon because the night was clear enough to notice that something or someone was following me. I resisted the temptation to turn around because it would surely disappear like before, so I kept a steady pace towards the kitchen to corner it. It came closer and closer with each step I took until it was right behind me. I grabbed the water pitcher and pretended to pour myself some, waiting for the right moment to corner it. I could feel its breath on my neck, cold and damp. I counted the exact moment to lunge backward with all my strength. 1, 2, and I failed. It covered my mouth and with the other arm immobilized my arms. I tried to scream, but it was impossible. It squeezed my face so hard I started to lose air. It was suffocating me. Suddenly, I woke up gasping for air, my throat raw and dry. I couldn't take it anymore. I told Chad we had to leave, that something was wrong with the apartment. He looked at me, concerned, but agreed. We packed our things quickly and left the apartment, checking into a hotel instead. That night, I slept peacefully for the first time since we arrived in Helsinki. The dream stopped, and the feeling of being watched was gone. It was a relief, but it also left me with a nagging question: what had been in that apartment with us? The next morning, as we were checking out of the hotel, I received a message from the Airbnb host. It simply said, "I'm sorry for any inconvenience. I hope you enjoyed your stay." There was a photo of the bathroom attached, taken after we left. You could see the other towel hook that I hadn't noticed at first, and the towel hanging from it was the one I had used the night before. I searched for the towel among my things and couldn't find it. It was clear that it was still damp. My blood ran cold. That hook hadn't been there when we arrived. I wasn't mistaken. The damp towel meant someone had been in the apartment, using our things, invading our space. A second message arrived, just 3 words: "I see you." We left Helsinki that day. I had no concrete evidence to accuse anyone, and if I had decided to do so, it would have been a waste of time. I never replied to the message. I just hope I never have to experience something like that again.
My name is Alex, and I recently traveled to Portland, Oregon, for a work conference. I booked an Airbnb in a historic building downtown, thinking it would be a convenient and interesting place to stay. The host, Lydia, left a message with the code to the lockbox for the keys. The building had an old charm with its brick facade and vintage elevator. The apartment was cozy but cluttered. The walls were covered in framed photos of a woman in various poses and settings, mostly artistic but some were unsettling, with dramatic lighting that made me uneasy. I arrived late in the afternoon, and after a long day of travel, I was exhausted. The apartment had a certain character to it, quirky decorations, lots of books and trinkets scattered around. It felt lived in, but a bit too personal for my taste. I noticed a series of photographs on the wall, all featuring the same woman, who I assumed was Lydia. They ranged from glamorous, professional shots to more candid, intimate moments. It felt like I was intruding into someone's very personal space. After unpacking, I realized I forgot to bring towels. I messaged Lydia, who quickly replied and told me to check the drawer under the bed. I found the drawer and opened it, only to see an array of sex toys and bondage gear. Shocked and embarrassed, I quickly shut it and found the towels in the next drawer. Trying to shake off the awkward discovery, I decided to get out for a while and grab some dinner. Portland had plenty of great restaurants, and I hoped a good meal would help me relax. After a delicious meal, I found a cozy bar nearby and ended up having a few drinks, 5 glasses of whiskey, to be precise. It was enough to feel the buzz, but stay conscious. By the time I got back, it was late, and I had a slight headache from the drinks. The city lights cast an eerie glow in the apartment that accentuated the gaze of all the photos towards whoever was in the room. I couldn't shake the feeling of unease with all those photos watching me. As I prepared for bed, I couldn't help but feel like I was being watched. I tried to dismiss the feeling as paranoia brought on by the unfamiliar surroundings. I lay in bed, trying to sleep. Around midnight, I was jolted awake by a loud thud. At first, I thought it was just the old building settling, but then I heard a faint scratching noise coming from behind one of the walls. My heart started pounding as I got up to listen closely. The noise was persistent, almost as if someone was trying to claw their way out. I told myself it was just my imagination and tried to go back to sleep, but the noise continued, growing louder and more frantic. I turned on all the lights, trying to banish the shadows. As I stood in the middle of the room, I noticed one of the photos was slightly askew. I walked over and straightened it, but as I did, I heard a faint whisper. It was so soft I couldn't make out any words, but it sent a chill down my spine. Suddenly, the photo fell off the wall, revealing a small hidden compartment. Inside, I found an old, dusty diary. My pulse quickened as I opened it. The entries were from Lydia, detailing her life and increasingly dark thoughts about a man she claimed was stalking her. The final entry mentioned she had hidden a camera in the apartment to catch him in the act. I was horrified. Was I being watched? I searched the apartment and found a small camera hidden in a vent, pointing directly at the bed. Panic set in. I grabbed my belongings and rushed out of the apartment, not caring about the time or that I had nowhere else to go. I spent the rest of the night in my car, parked in a well-lit area, too shaken to sleep. The next morning, I reported the incident to the local police. They took my statement and promised to investigate. Later, I found out that Lydia had been missing for months, and I had been staying in her apartment without knowing her fate. The Airbnb listing was removed, and the building was under investigation.